Yes, sir. So again, great to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. We're talking about cybersecurity and in the context of securing the bioeconomy, and I think there's just a couple of key pieces there. First, before I get into that, let me just talk a little bit about kind of what I do as a dovetail to what Keith mentioned for the Department of Defense Office of Small Business Programs, and that is I do handle a lot of the industry and engagement broadly, but my sort of, if you will, home sector or specialty is in and around cybersecurity for the defense industrial base, working in concert with Associate Director Derek Davis for the DoD Office of Small Business Programs, and we work directly with Farouk Mita, who's our esteemed director of the Office of Small Business Programs, who's forged, I think, a number of key policies and key strategic positionings, if you will, of the Department of Defense Office of Small Business Programs to be able to sort of step up to the challenges that we know that the defense industrial base faces, not only from a cybersecurity perspective, but more broadly there. And so my focus in turn is with a program called Project Spectrum, as you can see in my backdrop, which really seeks to provision resources specifically for small businesses in and around the defense industrial base, or those that are looking to contract with DoD, right? And so part of what I'm engaged in is making sure that we make sure that these no-cost resources are, that companies are aware of them, that they can engage with them, that they can touch with live cyber advisement that we have at the ready as part of our, funding with DoD Office of Small Business Programs, to make sure that they have everything they need to get them along on their cyber compliance journey. So whether that's with the NIST standards more broadly, specifically 800 Special Publication 800, 171, 172 for levels 2 and 3 respectively for CMMC, but then also for really any cyber compliance journey that they may be on. We know just recently here in the last couple of days that the CMMC or Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification final rule was published there in the Federal Register there on the 15th of October. So this is just affirmation that what we've been seeing over the last several years is in fact coming to fruition. That is the regulatory arm, if you will, compliance arm of the NIST standards, that being CMMC, which is housed under the DoD CIO, that in fact is coming to fruition, and it's here now, right? So we've heard a lot of talk about that, and so that's a big piece of what we're doing at Project Spectrum, helping companies become ready for that cyber compliance requirement that will be there in order to be able to do business with DoD, right? While there are talks about expanding that across the whole of federal government, we're not there yet, right? Or we're just finally getting to the point where we can roll this out to the DoD and have it be in place for anyone looking to do business with the Department of Defense. So that's a little bit about what I'm doing with Project Spectrum. Larry, I don't know if you wanted to jump in and talk a little bit about what you're doing there.
Absolutely. Appreciate that, Kareem. And thank you, Keith, for organizing obviously the entire summit, but even having the forward thinking to be able to organize this particular conversation, right? I mean, it's a very, very important conversation. Obviously, cybersecurity and data privacy is top of mind for just about everybody, but to make sure that this specific discussion is inclusive of the people that might not always have access to it, right? I think there are a number of cyber deserts, if I'll call them that exist. And unfortunately, even though agriculture and energy is such a critical infrastructure, many of the small and medium-sized enterprises or farmers that are in the space don't always necessarily have access to the information that's being shared. So, definitely hats off to you. Yeah, we are MOU partners. We look forward to all the things that we're going to do together in the future. But my name is, but I wanted to give you your flowers, so to speak, as it relates to having the discussion, because it's not always there. So my name is Larry Yon. I am co-founder and president of a US-based cybersecurity company called Cyber Alliance. We are based in the US and have a pretty good customer base across the US, but most probably interesting for this discussion, we are in about 8 markets across the continent, 8 countries across the continent of Africa. And we are funny, we actually started on the continent of Africa, developed many of our um, technology solutions and services on the continent of Africa, and then kind of had a reverse migration and came and brought them back to the US. So, probably that's probably relatively unique for a US based company to start on the continent of Africa. We started engaging even in West Africa and being able to develop our cyber risk assessment, which we call the cyber trust score. And we developed that with the idea of, hey, in order for us to be able to scale across the continent, we can't always just hop on a plane and go and fly and spend months and months on the continent to be able to engage with customers. My wife and kids wouldn't like that. I already make about 6 or 7 trips a year to the continent of Africa on I try to max them out at a week and a half or so, just so I don't, like I said, I don't keep myself sleeping on the couch when I get back to the U.S. But we decided to be able to, in order for us to be able to grow and scale across the continent, there were a couple of things that were fundamental for us. One is we had to establish the ability to partner and collaborate with people that are on the ground. Those partnerships allowed us to be able to have understanding of the nuances in the certain markets, allowed us to be able to understand the challenges and the opportunities in those respective markets, in order to be able to have really authentic, if you will, go-to-market strategies. And we developed our technologies and our solutions in a way where they could be contextualized, right? I think one of the things, the major barriers to cybersecurity and data privacy type conversations are that, whether it's a barrier to cost or it's a barrier to understanding or sophistication, sometimes it leaves people out of the conversation just by default. And we wanted to be able to develop solutions that were sensitive to that, and people could access them and use them no matter what their technology sophistication level is, right? So that was very important for us as a firm. We also have now a kind of a full suite of cybersecurity services, from pen testing to being virtual CISOs to our risk assessments to our vulnerability scans. We have a number of services and solutions that we offer to businesses and organizations of all sizes in the U.S. and on the continent of Africa. So I'm extremely happy for us to be having this discussion, particularly on the ag space. Whether we're talking about food security or we're talking about the development of trade between the U.S. and the continent of Africa, the reality is all of those things are leveraging technology to be more efficient, and we have to be able to make sure we're putting a certain level of attention to being able to protect those assets. So, thank you today for organizing this, Keith. Kareem, it's a pleasure to meet you, Keith. I don't know how much money you owe him, but he speaks very positively of you when you're not around. So those are typically good, either good friends or good customers to have. But I've been really looking forward to meeting you.
Likewise, sir. And again, I appreciate the opportunity. Keith, as always, he's mentioned you as well, and we see each other on the circuit as we're trotting around the country. Very passionate about some of the great work that we're doing to help these small businesses.
Kareem, are you coming to MedWeek? Are you coming to MedWeek?
I was slated to go, Keith, and they kind of pulled it at the last minute. As you know, we're at that fiscal year, and everything is drying up there.
Funny money. Yeah. Yeah. So what I find striking here, Kareem, is that this whole CMM2 is a sophisticated monster, and I've most sat in the front seat and the at the 8A conference, and was mystified. I wasn't demystified. I was mystified at the level of complexity associated, and
Yeah.
also the levels and layers that literally are now coming down as requirements. And my constant question was, how does a small business actually afford to go through this process? Now, in this conversation, I'm hoping it to continue to scale to a point of realization that there's an international component in Africa from a DoD perspective, and it being so important of a continent, right, to have relationships with. And how do we do that effectively, particularly against our bad actors that we compete with vociferously in the public square? And so does a cyber alliance who has this on the ground years of experience in the continent, is that an asset of sort to, the program?
I think so, absolutely, right. I mean, look, this is a multi-pronged approach, as you say. There's obvious considerations with regard to cost, not the least of which centers around, again, education awareness, right? We know a lot of companies out there, as much as we've been on the circuit for years talking about the vast resources, low and no cost resources specifically that avail themselves, whether it's NSA, Cyber Collaboration Center, some of the efforts they're doing. Whether it's DC3, right, and some of the low and no cost resources that they're provisioning, or some of the ones that we're doing, and even DHS, Homeland Security, has their own sort of, if you will, version of cyber compliance and so forth. But when we think about it, I think it's going to take collaborative measures, right? I don't know that we get to solution or even anywhere close to it without figuring out how do we strategically partner. So one of the things that we've been intently focused on at Project Spectrum is touching with, as you say, some of the HBCUs, touching with academia, touching with the small business development centers, leveraging the Apex Accelerator program, right, and their reach and connection with the universities, and figuring out how we can, get the word out there that these resources at low and no cost avail themselves, that companies do have help, right, insofar as defraying what would otherwise be exorbitant costs, right? So we know that there's going to be a cost, right, associated, or I should say a segment of costs associated with, meeting cyber compliance criteria now that we know that CMMC is in fact finalized. And I think what we've been trying to do proactively with DoD and the Project Spectrum program is looking at this from the standpoint of, just like with ISO, just like with CMMI, right, just like with many of these other compliance criteria to be able to do contracting with the government, specifically DoD, that there's going to be costs associated. Let's go ahead and catch and make companies aware of what they can do proactively on the front end in terms of education and awareness, even understanding, as you say, what can seem like a quagmire of regulations right around the DFARS and the Code of Federal Regulations, and how does this all pertain to me as a small business? How do I make sense of it? How do I sort of synthesize that? And then moving beyond that to actually provisioning resources, some of which Larry talked about, which I think is key here, right? So it's the self-assessment piece. We know that that's a component of this new guidance, right? So how do we offer those self-assessments at no cost to small businesses so that they can get an idea of where they stand, but not just having taken that self-assessment, but moving beyond that, actually engaging, with one of our live cyber advisors to be able to synthesize and go through and sort of put rubber to the road as to, okay, here's what you're purporting, what are you actually doing, and how do we get that part in line so that as we move throughout this cyber compliance journey, which really is a continuum, right? We look at cyber positioning of companies and their infrastructure, and it's a snapshot in time, right? So we've got to make this a habitual thing, particularly now that CMMC is in place. 3-year certifications. There's going to be renewals. There's going to be a lot of activity that's going to have to happen on a recurring basis. How do we make cyber compliance and hygiene this habitual thing that small businesses understand is not this extraneous activity that it has been unfortunately viewed as in the past. So that's a big part of our mission. And how do we do that? Well, we get them to first understand, right, the regulatory environment that is CMMC as it relates to cyber compliance. But then we move beyond that and actually provision actual tools, whether it's self-assessments, whether it's for NIST 800-171, whether it's CMMC, helping them get that snapshot of where they stand, where their existing infrastructure stands, if any, helping them understand what a system security plan is by way of some of the trainings that we offer online at no cost, right? Helping them understand what a plan of action milestones looks like and when that's applicable, right? Helping them be able to connect with C3 PAOs if in fact they need to, right? And in the case of CMMC level 2, we know under the prioritized acquisitions, if that designation comes into play, then they have to meet with a C3 PAO, right? So educating them about that and again, collaborating, right? So oftentimes when I'm on the circuit, we're talking about this, but then we're saying, Project Spectrum, really, we live in that preparatory piece, right? Getting companies prepared for all of what CMMC is going to entail, all of what NIST is kind of hanging down. And so from there's going to necessarily, right, in some cases, be a need to leverage a multitude of resources, right? And so we want to make sure that, the Cyber AB, for example, we've worked with the accreditation body to even had Matt Travis on to some of our cyber circuit events that we do periodically to kind of educate, small businesses throughout and within and around the DIB about, the sort of how we work together, right? And how we can, guide folks in the right direction, whether it's third-party tools, SaaS solutions, SIM solutions, government regulatory compliance, right? What's out there at low and no cost, and even things that are at cost, right? That we can sort of categorize them and sort of, as opposed to having companies go to 100, maybe 200 different sites and do their own research, we've sort of done that on projectspectrum.io so they can come in and look at various resources that are out there that can be of assistance.
Larry, how do you see, and given what you've just heard, what's the shaping of the business model from your perspective for Cyber Alliance?
The shaping of the Cyber Alliance business model?
Yeah, in lieu of this environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, in reality, as it relates to the Cyber Alliance business model, right? The reality about cybersecurity is, to Kareem's point, it isn't a solution that one company can solve or one person can solve, right? Or one industry can solve. This is a problem that's completely interconnected. The business model that we have is founded in, our name, right? It's Cyber Alliance, right? Probably the most important part of our name is the alliance part. And for us, we leverage learning. We're an industry agnostic company, right? So whether we're working with agriculture companies or banks or financial services or mom and pop shops, whomever is using and leveraging technology or leveraging the internet are customers of ours, right? We've serviced, multi-billion-dollar, multinational corporations, and we've serviced, one-man bands, right? So so for us, the learnings that we have in terms of best practices, in terms of understanding where cyber trends are, in terms of understanding varying different risk profiles, we actually leverage that information to be able to provide to help all of our customers design cybersecurity programs that are customized to their specific risk profile, right? So we are focused on making sure that our model is able to be contextualized no matter what the region is, no matter what your financial situation is, no matter what your internal sophistication is, right? So if you're thinking about it from a perspective that most cyber attacks are targeted at small businesses, right? They're not necessarily targeted at big businesses. I think the last stat I saw was maybe 60% of cyber attacks, or of all cyber attacks, were targeted at small and medium-sized enterprises. But why, right? Because you have most small and medium-sized enterprises walking around like, hey, I'm too small to be breached, or I'm just so focused on, servicing my customer. I don't want to spend extra money on expensive technology, et cetera, right? So there's so many reasons that most small businesses are, ultimately naked, as it relates to cybersecurity preparedness and resiliency, right? So our business model is not ignoring that, making sure, because what we understand and what we're trying to prevent is an actual digital pandemic, right? Everyone is sensitive to a health pandemic and the widespread occurrence of and the fatalities of pandemics in general. But if you think about it from a perspective that maybe I think this thing is as high as 43% of businesses, small businesses that are breached, end up going out of business within 6 months, right? And you ask yourself why if you don't know, right? The
Wow.
reason is, if you're breached and you're a small business, first of all, you can't survive the reputational stain, right? Customers always have options when it's in regards to small businesses. I
Yeah.
tell the joke that if Amazon gets breached today, I promise you, my wife and kids are going to still make a purchase this afternoon, right? They can survive the small, they can survive the reputational stain of a cyber occurrence, but in many cases, small businesses can't, right? If you're a small business and your customers or business partners realize that you can't protect their data, they're just going to go to another small business, right? The second thing is they can't survive being, operationally down, right? Most small businesses can't even take the time to go to a conference or listen to a virtual session, let alone with having their operations being down because they are being ransomed, for example. And then if they are, they can't survive the financial liability or the financial risk, right? So when small businesses are targeted, and many small businesses, and you think about it from this perspective, right, Keith, and I know you appreciate this, for the work that you do to help small businesses get in the supply chains, get government contracts, or get even corporate contract, enterprise contract. None of those government agencies or enterprises want their weakest link to be a small business who doesn't have, internal cyber protocols in place. And our business model is designed to be able to work with organizations, government agencies, industry associations, et cetera, to make sure that those small businesses and large businesses and industry associations have the access to information they need to be empowered to develop the cybersecurity program that's best for them, right? So we put a lot of attention, because we're dealing with small and medium-sized enterprises or even large enterprises, because the problems are the same, right? Large enterprises don't have big enough cyber programs. They don't have enough cyber talent. Small businesses don't have enough cyber talent. So let's not create the picture that small businesses are the only ones who have needs. My algorithm picks up every big business breach. So every day I see new breaches by big businesses, right? So I'm not painting. I don't want to paint that picture, but I do want to say that it's important that as we start to think about supply chains, as we start to think about business growth, that we are not leaving out SMEs out of the conversation to having access to the
Yeah.
resources. Because what you don't want to happen are large enterprises or government agencies to say, you know what, I'm going to lock out. I'm not going to give award contracts to small businesses who don't have this, who can't mirror the cybersecurity program that we have, right? Because government agencies, corporations, they spend millions and millions of dollars on their cybersecurity program,
Right.
right? Small businesses probably, some of them don't spend any money at all, right? In that regard. So the free services that Kareem is speaking of, the services that we provide at Cyber Alliance are all resources that are designed specifically to be able to help small businesses. Our models, respectively, are designed to help small businesses be able to prepare themselves, but more than prepare themselves, position themselves for the opportunities and the growth that they want to achieve.
Yeah, Kareem, I want to leverage our affectionate relationship here and get down to the risk factors associated with this conversation, because this is high risk.
Absolutely.
It's high risk because we're talking about the potential of the diminution of small businesses in the supply chain at a time when we've already been dipping into a decline for various reasons. And when it comes to government contracting, in facto. So how do we reverse the course of action here? How do we avoid a further decline? And how do we inspire, because this is here, how do we inspire a solution that increases the number of small businesses because of this new CMM2 mandate?
Yeah, I know. It's an important question, right? And it's got to be, as I say, top of mind when we're thinking about, the supply chain and the national security, as you pointed out, the national security, concerns there as a result. And when you think about, just to go back, and you think about, some 40% of those small businesses that dropped out of the supply chain, that COVID just exacerbated, right, an already existing problem, right? And that is, I think somebody alluded to it earlier, the fact that there's a, sort of an attrition rate here of the knowledge, right? Those folks that have the cybersecurity expertise, those professionals, a lot of them are retiring or moving on, and we're not backfilling that nearly to the rate that we need to in order to be able to sort of circumvent the implications of that loss of expertise in the industry. So that's a piece of it. The other thing is just to emphasize more what Larry was saying before I get to what you said, Keith, is when we think about those specific threat vectors, right, that are targeted at small businesses, right. When we think about, I think it's a little less than 28, something like 28% of those have plans in place to mitigate those attacks. So not only are they being targeted, but there is a very, very disproportionate percentage of those businesses that have the means by which to mitigate the effects of those attacks once they occur. So that's another troubling piece to this. And then again, when we think about 3/4 of the breaches that are happening, right, are caused due to human error, right? So we know there's a training component. We know there's this is why when I know we talk about education awareness and we sort of say, oh, we know that's there, but no, that's a very legitimate, real focus that I think has to be pointed out, right? And that is, if more than 3/4 or just about 3/4 of those breaches are happening due to human error, that means that people are not educated about what needs to be in place in order to avoid these things. And even if they are aware of it, they don't have the adequate training to be able to then protect themselves. So that's another piece. And then there's another piece here that just a mere 14% of those small and medium-sized businesses have cyber insurance in place, right? This is another thing that is very, very real that a lot of small businesses, again, by way of access to the information, either don't know about or don't understand how they can go about doing that. And then, yes, there's cost associated with it. But when we think about the relative cost of not deploying some of these technologies to be able to kind of proactively prevent things, I think it far outweighs, right, whatever cost would be shouldered by those small businesses. And I understand that there's concerns there, but so I think to your point, how do we chart a way forward? How do we figure out how do we move forward? And I think part of that has got to be around understanding helping to get the resources out, figuring out collaborative partnerships that make sense, right? So, understanding that any one company is not going to be the solution, but that it's going to be a collaborative effort. I look at some of the things that Cyber Alliance is doing and getting into some of the pen testing and some of the other sort of hands-on, if you will, SOC analyst type work that is absolutely needed to be able to help these companies, right? I think that it's going to be a collaborative piece where I think, yes, they need Project Spectrum. They're going to need to understand the sort of compliance quagmire, right? They're going to need to understand the regulatory piece of this. But they also have to understand that whether they need to meet with a C3PA or not, there's utility in understanding what those respective folks are doing and how the information they have can help in the grand scheme of increasing their cyber compliance and hygiene, and looking at companies like Cyber Alliance and looking at what Larry's talking about here. I think it has to be a collaborative effort. We have to figure out how to, and again, we're balancing costs here, right? Because these are all, when I talk about the resource of Project Spectrum being at no cost, it's at no cost to the small business, right? Or to the companies that are engaging and coming into projectspectrum.io to leverage those resources. But somebody's paying for them. We all know that, right? And and that's, I think, what DoD is saying is, hey, let's lay out, let's lay out and defray what would otherwise be just exorbitant costs, even in the preparation piece, even in getting ready for, the compliance piece. Or certification, I should say, even in getting ready for certification for CMMC, for example. There's so many things that have to happen before them, not the least of which, again, is education and outreach and helping them understand this environment that is now here that they're going to be held to, right? And so I think that's a piece of it.
Yes, I want to touch something on that too, Keith, right? So because when you think about the things that Project Spectrum is providing in terms of preparedness, and the piece that Cyber Alliance is providing in terms of how are we leveraging or how are we helping the companies utilize cybersecurity to enable growth, right? That's a different part of it, right? Because to Kareem's point, you have to be prepared, but you also have to have someone that also helps you translate what you're doing on the cybersecurity side to be able to help enable your growth, right? And sometimes that ends up being lost in translation. I think that Kareem brought up a very good point, and it's one of the major aspects of our initial engagements is helping the businesses understand what their people gaps are, what their process gaps are, and what their technology gaps are. I want to say it a little bit differently from how Keith said it, because you can invest all the money in the world and have the best technologies in the world, right? You can have the most sophisticated technology, but if your people aren't using it properly, or if you don't have policies in place that kind of are guide rails for making sure that you are not making mistakes, your technology is not going to be effective, right? And what we are being faced with in this particular market is everybody is utilizing technology to help them speed up their process, right? To speed up their growth, to speed up their efficiency.
Yeah.
For now, the first time in ever, a small farmer can compete with a big farmer because of technology, right? Technology can change that, right? And whether they're using drones or they're using, any number of tech-related solutions for specifically, let's say, agriculture, those are all opportunities where, yes, you can be more efficient. Yes, you can collect more data. Yes, you can figure out how to grow crops faster and so forth and so on. But you've just opened yourself up to so many more opportunities for you to be breached, right?
Yes.
And that's something that I think ultimately ends up being what we are trying to solve for, because you don't want, someone, hacking into a drone and throwing off, data or stealing IP.
This is a mess here, guys. I'm here to tell you.
Livestock or whatever the case may be, because now, as a farmer, something messes up, people in the farmer industry, that crop is gone, right? So, and you
real consequences.
You can't just turn around and have more corn, right? It just doesn't work that way, right? So where technology is the great equalizer, right? And it can speed up your opportunity. It can also widen the gap, right? So if the small farmers or the large farmers that are utilizing or co-oping with small farmers don't have the protocols in place to be able to protect themselves, now we're talking about much bigger issues, right? In terms of food security and food availability, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't want that part to be missed as it relates to the practice of Cyber Alliance and the impact of cybersecurity on the ag space.
Yeah. Hey, listen, with 1 minute left, I'm here to tell you that, Kareem, our continuous conversation is so essential because we have Executive Order 13985, which drives a requirement to have equitable small business participation in the acquisition process. Number
Yep.
two, we are really teetering on a level of complexity that puts at greater risk the loss potential of small businesses. The whole of government really comes into play here, right? I mean, I'm looking forward to the Apex collaboration with MBDA centers.
Yes.
We have centers around the country, even SBDCs. All of us need to now come together, as they say in Africa, Ubuntu, juntos in Spanish, together, because we can't do this and we run to risks, and the risks are too high. And actually, what we're trying to do good and protect can so easily be counteracted. It could be usurped if we don't put this collaborative formula in place. And so,
100%, 100%, Keith. And you know, I'm right there with you. And I think there's some things that are happening already. I think was it just about 2 years ago? I think the White House had put out the fact sheet around AFRICOM, and some of was it 250 million that they were spending across the continent of Africa. But there's more to be done, right? There's more that we can do. There's more that we have to do, and because that was in around security and some of the peace efforts and things like that. But I think there's so much more to be done, and I think it has to be, like you said, a multi-pronged solution, collaborative efforts,
yes,
working with each other, figuring out the complexities of it, and looking at our strengths, right? Like looking
yes,
at where we've
yes,
had success, so far, and how can we add on to that, reshape what that may look like. I think Project Spectrum is all about figuring out what partnerships look like. I mean, we've worked with a lot of agencies across, as you know, the DIB, and we need to expand that and grow that, right? And figure out what makes sense for the benefit, because as you said, there's a lot at stake here for small businesses.